Hey guys, welcome back to the Another Excuse podcast, where we chat to founders, creators, and self-starters about how they started and where they are now. Today's guest is Luke Bolton, founder of In Zero Waste, a company that delivered zero waste shopping and refills to your door. In the episode, we discuss validating and running with an idea, the valuable lessons learned from starting a business, and the power of no-code tools, and how they enable you to build complicated backends with no developer knowledge. Enjoy the show. So Luke, just to get started, can you give me a bit of context on your career journey and how it led you to where you are today?
Sure. So a bit of background. Studied in Cape Town, did a very traditional kind of finance and accounting degree, and then decided to not go the full accounting or chartered accountant route. I was always drawn to startups and a far more kind of small company environment, and decided that the move over to London would be a really good place to start that. So started at a very small artificial intelligence company, actually based out of Modena, Italy. But I was in London, worked there for a number of years, and then wanted to get more involved in the startup ecosystem. So I moved to a crowdfunding platform called Seeders and worked on the investment team there, and saw kind of, I would say, with the team, hundreds of businesses come through, did due diligences, and walked all these founders through the investment process for dozens and dozens of companies. Got a really cool idea or good idea of what these businesses were and which ones were working. And then while I was at Cedars, I founded In Zero Waste, which I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about. And then since then, I've gone back into the VC environment, and more recently into a late stage private equity business.
Awesome. So most of your experience has been more startup focused. Is there any reason why you think you gravitated towards that type of business as opposed to the usual corporate trajectory?
Good question. And my parents have kind of been asking me that as well for a while. But I think it started with kind of a lack of risk aversion, really wanting to make an impact in the businesses that I was working in. I think it played into my skill set far more, where you got to talk to people, understand things, come up with ideas that, actually get implemented or heard. And I really like that from just a personality trait. And I think those are the main reasons why. And retrospectively, I do doubt whether that's the best move straight out of kind of your first job, but it's landed me where I am. So, and I'm not sad about that.
Yeah, not complaining. So on your journey, as you mentioned, you founded a company called In Zero Waste, which, as I understand, stands for If Not Now, the INN. And that's what I'd really like to focus on today. So what problem were you trying to solve starting In?
So, just a quick anecdote on the name. We were looking kind of at names, and we kept coming across this kind of almost slogan in the space that was, if not now, then when. And it very much related to this waste-free living, a kind of environment where people are so much more aware of their impact that they're having on the planet, but there are not a lot of options on how to actually do that in a way that is affordable, accessible, and just easy and convenient for people to actually use. You want to help, but you don't really have the option. And the idea was really created when it was lockdown 2020. Ended up having quite a lot more time on my hands, and essentially one of my roommates that I was living with at the time, she would she was really passionate about the zero waste space. And we lived in Brixton at the time, and she would do a 15-20 minute walk across Brockwell Park and into Herne Hill, and take all of her containers, empty containers, glass containers, and because she didn't want to do this walk all the time, she would lug back 15 kgs of all of these dry foods, your oats, your nuts, your grains, etc., your pastas. And I just said to her, I said, Cassie, you being such a great person, this is so difficult to do. And that's kind of where the idea came out of, just saying, people are doing this. People are really committed to this, despite it being so hard, despite it being such a cumbersome task, and kind of still more expensive than your Sainsbury's or your Tesco's or your M&S, and I just thought, well, that's a really good opportunity with e-commerce becoming far more pervasive. I said, why can't we deliver this? And that's where kind of the idea, kind of the inception of it, at least.
Do you think being surrounded by so many startups in your previous jobs made you more aware of these kind of opportunities?
I definitely think so. I think also, seeing the founders and like their issues and the type of people that they were, it gave me, confidence that these are just normal, these are normal people that are just going out and doing something that they believe in, not these are extraordinary high achievers that I could never get to or never bridge that gap, or these people with massive trust funds and all the rest that have unlimited backing. It gave me kind of quite a lot of confidence to just go, well, I think these people can do it. That's the one element. And then the other element is, I was able to see their business models. I was able to see how they worked. I was able to see kind of, get a better picture of like how these businesses actually run and like what makes them tick. And I think that kind of played into, like, helped me get over the bridge of going, okay, I can start a company. It's not all foreign. I know it's still going to be hard, but I know some of the elements.
Wow, that's really useful. So I feel people feel the urge to start a business, but get overwhelmed by like the possibilities and directions they can go in. And you mentioned how you noticed this problem, but how did you take that next step? How did you go about deciding that this was worth pursuing and actually starting a business and then sticking to it till the end?
I thought about this a little bit, and it's interesting because the way we approached it, at least initially, I was just doing kind of, just Googling and desktop research on the market, what's going on, who are the other zero waste stores, and kind of just getting more into it. And that kind of built up my, interest in it, where I saw kind of, this is not a space where anyone really is operating, but it's a space where like a lot of people are talking about it. There's a lot of coverage, but they're not a lot of solutions. So that excitement built up, which like really helps in terms of like getting over the line. But also, and this is pros and cons to this, I definitely approached it from the perspective of, this is a learning experience. This is a side project. I didn't want to quit my job. And that takes the pressure off. I wasn't trying like to build a unicorn. I was just saying, I think this is a really good idea. I think this has got legs. And I'm not going out there telling people with my goal is that I'm going to build the biggest business in the world and like I want to shoot the lights off and going raising kind of a seed round from the get-go. It was very much like, okay, cool, let's start out. What's the next step to like actually seeing if this is right? But the big downside of that approach, at least kind of looking back on it now, is I don't feel I did enough research into kind of looking at like how this business model scales out and like what's going to be really hard about it. I was, and kind of true to my nature, I would say over optimistic and over kind of happy go lucky. Let's just see where this goes. I'm not investing a huge amount of capital in this. Like, let's just, go along with it as more of a learning experience side project. And I think this has got legs type approach. So, and I think those early research steps, if I was repeating, I would definitely go into a lot more depth of like how this scales out, and businesses down the line, like, even if they're not exactly the same as me, there are lots of grocery businesses that I could have looked at that are public, even that I could, I didn't download their financial results and go, oh, this business is making a lot of money, therefore there's hope for me. What we are doing, if I look at those businesses, you look at Ocado and you look at those businesses, they're not making a huge amount of money. I think Ocado lost money last year. So it's a double-edged sword with, that happy-go-lucky approach. Getting started was easy, but, I didn't think of all the outcomes.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's almost, like you said, it's a double-edged sword, but you almost need to be optimistic enough to actually give it a go, then over-research and become realistic, and then not pursue it because you feel like it's not worth it.
No, exactly. Because I think when you're looking at these things, there are thousands of reasons not to do it. There are always going to be way more reasons not to do it because it's so risky. But yeah, it's a tricky one to think about. I think you need to do a level of research where there are people that are in the market who are doing it well and making money. I think that's like a key one that's not that hard to do. And if you can't find enough of those, you need to ask yourself, well, like, why are they not? And if I'm solving the problem of why they're not, well, then let me still go ahead with this, but not like over analyzing all the different ways this could go, and because most of those are actually failure, so you're gonna psych yourself out.
Yeah. So many people fear starting something themselves and taking that leap, myself included. So did you have any fears starting in, and if so, how did you overcome them?
I think that goes back to the point where you kind of you getting excited about this idea, and you like constantly, the more you research it, like the more excited I got. So I was like, that's in my own mind a affirmation. I also thought that, if you like break it down to like its simplest parts, does this actually make sense? Like, not from a business model point of view, but from a customer point of view, do people want this? And I think for me, with the fact that people were, like Cassie was going out of her way to buy this product despite it being so difficult, and that for me was like a lot of affirmation. And then from like a human structure, or like a social structure, going to kind of friends and family and asking them, well, what do you think of this? And going through it all. And I think, my dad was a massive sounding board to all of this, where I went to him and, we discussed things at length about, the viability and what was gonna happen, and all these different kind of situations. And that was like a real big advantage that I had him there to kind of direct it, and almost kind of give me confidence that, this is this might not be the silver bullet, but it's got legs. This is worth giving it a bash. And I think that's all you need, is like, this is a good idea and could go somewhere. I don't think you need to know, or if you'll ever know, this is the perfect thing and I'm going to make bucket loads of money and be fulfilled.
Yeah. But for some people, even if it is, so for you say it doesn't have to be the perfect thing, but for some people, their fear overrides that sort of level of risk aversion that you have, and their level of fear and risk might be higher than yours. And so they tell themselves, maybe as an excuse, that I needed to be more perfect. So do you think that boils down to having a supportive social circle like your dad and other things, or are you just naturally more risk averse than, say, the average person?
Well, I think like it's a bit of both, but like for instance, we did do some things in the early stages that gave us confidence. We made like quite a thorough survey where that we sent out to our friends, and we got like 150 responses on like just basic principles of like, do you think this is a good idea? Would you use it? Like, we went through this quite a extensive exercise of going, okay, let's not get outside of our own heads and get some perspective on this. And then we also I chatted to about 6 or 7 other zero waste stores that were doing it, and I was incredibly shocked and pleasantly surprised that it's such a inclusive market. The people running these stores, they just want more people doing zero waste. They're not kind of commercially minded, to the point where one of the stores sent me their business model, sent me their latest like results, sent me how much of each product they were selling, like super sensitive information for other businesses, but like gave us an incredibly good insight into, okay, well, this is actually viable. People are selling these things. This is how much they're selling. They've got this little shoebox store in wherever they're selling out of, and they're making money, and they keeping it going. So I think it's those, like, you do have to talk to people, and you do have to do a lot of research, maybe. And this is research outside of the like looking far down the line, and if this is like for your next like 5 steps or like 6 months, like where you're going to be, and like speaking to those people. And we did quite a lot of that, which gave us a lot of confidence, which was nice.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a really valuable sort of lesson, is you need to take those those little steps in the right direction to validate your idea. You're not going to just figuring it out Googling and stuff. You need to speak to people who are in the trenches, doing it day to day, and making sure that your idea actually has legs. So how big was your team, and what roles did each of you play in turning this idea into a reality?
So the team was, I mean, super small throughout the whole process, but essentially it was just me when I started. Well, when I came up with the idea, and then one of my good friends and housemates at the time, Will van der Bijl, kind of joined me, and he's got a background in environmental consulting, mainly focusing on kind of electric vehicles and that sort of thing, but a very structured, pragmatic, process-driven approach to things, which is very different to my approach and my skill set. He didn't have any of the kind of the financial background, so I thought that aligned really well with kind of what we wanted to do, especially because this business requires a huge amount of what I'd call like high touch. There's you're processing these ingredients, you're returning the bags, and you're doing all the rest. I realize I haven't actually explained what the business is and kind of what it does, so I can go back and do that. But just to remain on this, our third team member, a Cedars colleague of mine who I really got along with, Lawson, and he was in the growth team at Cedars, had really good growth marketing skills. He knew how to build websites just from like a no code perspective, but a little bit of code, but very, very minimal, and very design focused, brand focused, and just a truly nice guy and a great guy to work with. So I think that's super important. And then, but from a skill set point of view, he understood a completely different side of the business that both Will and I didn't have any skills in. So Will was kind of process driven, Nick was marketing driven, I was kind of, accounting, business model, finance, like more strategy side of things, and then also like kind of bringing all of those skill sets Nick and Will together, I guess. But we were very much kind of a flat team and didn't have any like hierarchy at all. So it was, I think our skill sets like combined really nicely, which is great.
Awesome. And how important would you say it is to pick like a good team to start a business? I'm sure this goes further than just in with your experience at Cedars and things like that, looking at different startups.
I would say it's kind of in, if not the most important, kind of top three of what's going to happen, because inevitably your business is very likely to change from its original idea, or at least pivot slightly. And if you have a good team, and when I say a good team, there's like two components. That one is the like skill set, like how well you offset each other, and how well you work, like how well your skills, combine to make a sum that's greater than the whole. And then secondly, and I'd say this is actually as important, if not more important, is do you actually like working with these people? Because it's going to fail so, well, in my opinion, it's going to fail so quickly if you don't enjoy these people, if you can't kind of be socially, you spend a lot of hours together. There's a lot of tricky decisions. There's a lot of trust. There's a lot of, situations where it hasn't worked out perfectly. And there's a lot of situations where there's overwhelming joy. And like, you want to share those experiences. You want to share the good times, and you want to share the bad times with people that you really want to be with, and you want along the journey. So I think that's like, I think I got quite lucky, because I was thinking about it far more from a skills perspective. And I was lucky that I knew people that I liked, and the first people I asked kind of joined, which was great. But yeah, I think it's critical to work with people you actually enjoy. And I've seen that like in past businesses and future businesses as well.
That makes sense. And you touched on it before we continue. Could you maybe just explain in more detail what you guys did?
Yeah, sure. So In Zero Waste is a zero waste online delivery business where we use reusable packaging to package all our products. So, for example, we would send you oats in a hemp bag and send that across to you via Royal Mail, or if you're in London, we'd send that on bikes. You would then, once you've used your oats, you would then send the packaging back to us, and when we'd wash it and reuse that packaging. So there's zero waste from a packaging perspective. And that's kind of how the business model would work.
Awesome. That makes sense. So did you receive any funding to start, or was In just completely bootstrapped?
So In was completely bootstrapped for the first, I'd say, 6 months. We then got a bounce back loan, well, one of those COVID scheme bounce back loans, which was really great and like helped the business immensely. We are able to kind of take the business out of our spare bedroom and into an actual kind of warehouse. We were able to stop doing the deliveries ourselves and kind of get some marketing help as well. We had a marketing intern, which was a massive help. And also just from an inventory perspective, from a packaging perspective, we were able to kind of scale up that operation immensely. So we didn't take on any kind of equity investment, but we did take some loans.
And starting a business can be scrappy, but do you have any scrappy stories of what it took to get In off the ground?
Probably far more than I should, but we started this business super small, and it was really important to me to prove the concept before we went out and spent a lot of money and got in like proper infrastructure and all of those sorts of things. So the first thing we bought were bike trailers, which we could attach to the back of our own bikes. We then kind of set our delivery radius around our house, about I mean, we set it far too wide initially, which was like 10Ks, which is a long, and we were working full time at this point. So, and then so any night in London, rainy, cold, like completely misty, whatever it is, we were determined to make this work. So there weren't going to be any late deliveries. Like load up the deliveries on the back of the bike and put on your rain jacket, like get your phone out. We had a little special app that like designed our route for us, and we got on the bike and took off for the evening. I mean, sometimes doing like 3 or 4 hours of delivery, getting back at like 11:30 at night. It was quite funny. There are lots of stories that came out of that, but it was fun. And other ones of as I mentioned, it was in our spare room, so we were packing all these things. We were using the kitchen scale to weigh the different bags. We took all the product photos ourselves with an old digital camera. We bought like a white box so we could photograph all of them. I'd photoshopped them all to kind of take out the backgrounds, and it was super bootstrapped, low, like super scrappy. But I mean, that's where you kind of learn all the grit and what it actually takes to run this thing.
Yeah, that definitely shows what it takes. Just out of interest, what was your promised delivery time?
So we initially, I think it was, I need to recall now, but it was 2 or 3 days, I think. So it was slow, but we did two, depending on the weeks, we did like 2 delivery slots. So we did Tuesdays and Thursdays. I think that's when we delivered in our area, and we just rotated who did that.
Awesome. And you said you had a special app that planned your route. Was that just an app that you found, or was it like specifically for you guys? Or
yeah, it's actually a great app. It's called Circuit, and free app to get. And essentially you just plug in all of your delivery addresses, and then you send it to your phone, and it just puts them all in Google Maps as like waypoints, and then it just like forms your most efficient route, which was actually so great. It was a game changer.
yeah, that's awesome. And this might be a difficult question to answer, but what was the hardest part about starting or running in?
That is a difficult question. I'd say from starting in, I think I was over optimistic on the initial timelines. I would have, taken a lot more time to do the administrative stuff. So there's like easy things like setting up a business, setting up a bank account. Those aren't difficult, but then you're setting up trademarks, you're setting up accounting softwares, you're setting up, and probably the most difficult one, especially for me because I'm a little bit geeky, is like what are the right softwares to use from the get-go, because it's very hard to transition when you're like halfway through. So it's a bit of a balance, but choosing the right ones that aren't ridiculously expensive, but are going to set you up so that you don't have to move, and that you've got a flexible program. So I think from spending so much time not actually working on the business, like not actually trying to like grow this business, or like you feel like you're not making progress because you've spent so much time just setting up all this infrastructure that is gonna house it. And then doing that like full with a full-time job is you need to like actually be realistic with how much time that's going to take, and get to the right place before you start kind of like putting out Instagrams, etc., coming soon, all of those types of things, because you don't want to find yourself rushing and then giving a poor service. That was like super important to us, not to like disappoint anyone. And then from running the business, this is a whole kind of kettle of fish that we I'm sure we'll unpack. But it goes back to, and it's been repeated over and over and over again, but I think it's one of the biggest lessons from working on N is working inside the business versus working on the business. And for me, it's super important when you're in kind of your proof of concept phase, going, is this actually viable? Do people want this? Very much so. Be in the business, be nitty gritty, be for us packing the ingredients. How long does that take? You know, how expensive is this? How do we mark this up? What's too expensive? What can you buy this for at, one of the big supermarkets? All of that stuff. So good to be in the business, looking at every single detail. But once you get to the phase where you actually now, okay, we've got a little bit of traction, we've got, things are kind of moving. They're never going to be, moving like slickly, to be honest. But we're going in the right direction. From that point, you need to allocate and be super disciplined in allocating some time to thinking just a little bit outside the, and I'm not saying, because time is just a ridiculously rare resource, but like allocating an hour or two a day to just being like, okay, where's this going? Let me just actually put in some high level thought of like, how are we actually going to grow this? What am I actually going to do? Because you can just go down rabbit holes because there're just not enough people and there's too many things to do. So really prioritizing and focusing on kind of what you want to do. And I didn't do enough of that. I was too over enthusiastic. I was too just wanting to get my hands dirty, too like, eager almost. And, I didn't take enough steps back to go, okay, this is super important. Let's work on this a lot now. Let's that's a bit shit, but let's leave that for, later. It's not perfect, but it doesn't really matter right now. So I think that was my, and in that mode you have kind of semi blinkers on where, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but like we didn't ever think once, even when we got that COVID loan, which, we had quite a bit of money around us, businesses were, asking for help. They were struggling, they were closing, etc. We didn't ever once think, let's grow by acquiring, let's go out and acquire another business, get their customers, like that's a really easy way to expand. But we were very focused on, like just our one line of thought. If we had just taken a couple of steps back and gone, okay, well, these are our options, we might have still have gone what we did, but at least we would have thought through some of the different options that we had. And I think, yeah, that's those lessons are like, those lessons are super important in like how I'd think about it in the next business that I go in.
Yeah, the hindsight is obviously 2020, but there's still such valuable lessons for going forward and for your next sort of project. But starting a new business means you wear like many hats. So in the same vein, also quite a tricky question, but can you name some like important skills or lessons you otherwise wouldn't have learned if you didn't start in?
I think so. First of all, like two buckets, I suppose, the like harder skills and then the softer, probably more important lessons. But from like the harder skills perspective, like we learned new softwares, which I've taken forward and are going to be super useful in kind of almost everything. I'd use them in my daily life now. The Airtables, which is essentially a database management tool that's connected to all sorts of different services. And we use that across our business, from, inventory management to packaging, to connecting to emails, to all, like, it's just the most ridiculously good software that, we used from the get-go and was, has been fundamental in that business's success. And like and I know you've spoken about it before in some of your newsletters, but the low code and no code integrations and tools, kind of getting so much confidence out of the fact that I have no development skills. And, despite my one course that is on my LinkedIn, but no development skills whatsoever. And the ability to be able to do quite technical things or things that seem super technical with YouTube and a low code software is just, it's blown my mind how effective you can be and how far you can get on your own versus, just immediately going, I can't do it, handing us over to, I'll find a dev somewhere and, outsource this. I think it's just, it's amazing how far you can get with that. So I'd say that's like from the hard skills perspective, that's like one of the biggest ones. And then, I mean, there's like the small ones, the nitty gritty stuff that just would be easier next time, like accounting, setting up the company, taxes, PAYE, pensions, like all setting up those things, how that works, like becoming a VAT vendor. It just takes time out of your day to kind of go research, like, should we be doing this? How do I submit my taxes? How do I get a VAT repayment? All these, like, those types of skills. And then another area I found super interesting was like the forecasting, the unit economics, especially for our type of business, was really interesting to see how like different factors are disproportionate in what we're doing, especially with such a low margin product, and where we had like hundreds, if not thousands of variations in our products. Because, if you sell a big bag of oats, a small bag of oats, medium bag, and you multiply that across your inventory, you've got kind of thousands of products. And how do those different products like upset your kind of unit economics and business model as a whole? And, you'll get things like, if someone orders like 5 kgs of oats, they're so light, but they come in this massive bag. So it completely upsets your postage. Now you're paying ridiculous amounts for postage on like an incredibly low weight and low value product. But now you need to factor that into that business model because, you're paying more for the postage than they're paying you for the oats. So like how to like almost incentivize and create, solutions around that without kind of, passing that directly onto the customer. I think that's all from kind of a hard skills. One thing I was really disappointed that I didn't learn as much of, and it's just didn't have enough time, but also didn't focus on it enough and relied too much on Nick for it, is I didn't learn enough of the online marketing side of things. And I think that was like a little bit of an area where I'd have loved to learn more and like understand it better. I was like very involved in Instagram and kind of the public facing stuff, but none of the like, the Google ads and the optimization and the SEO and those types of things, where I knew the high level stuff, but I should have really got kind of into the details. It was a bit of a missed opportunity. But on the softer skills side, I think these are where the real important lessons are, and like where like that are super transferable across even kind of next roles and businesses. I would say, like I've said it before, but having the blinders on and being too much in the business, I won't go too much into that. We also, and I sometimes think this is unavoidable, but we had an over-reliance on one partnership where we had to like scale up our whole business operations. And, because that business partnership didn't work out in the way we wanted to, we were in a very precarious place to, what our capital expenditure was to support that project, but we weren't kind of selling enough to do that. So, having your own organic sales is an area like I should have spent 80% of my time doing and driving, is just kind of letting the back end be quite a bit messier and scrappy, and like just working harder and getting through that and getting that done, and just focusing on getting product out the door and selling as much as we could. So we focused so much on like building this product that it was going to scale, and how we're going to, like, when it gets to the next level, how we're going to service all these orders. And that was because of this partnership. But in the same respect, like, we were obsessive about like having the infrastructure to scale without actually scaling. And it was like one foot after the other. So like just focusing on, on the customer and like where your sales are actually coming from, I'd say kind of are big ones.
Yeah, those are all such valuable lessons. And I mean, even the marketing aspect where you feel like you didn't learn enough about, just knowing that you want to maybe learn more about it or prioritize it, I'm sure you'll do that on your next project. Because I mean, you had such a full plate like already. So I mean, you can't really beat yourself up for not being able to do everything within the business. So what did you enjoy most about setting up and running the company?
I loved the fact that there's like some, I don't know what it is, but it's this innate good feeling about creating something and like taking something from nothing to something where you deliver it, where you've created this system, you've created these almost things out of thin air, and eventually you kind of get it to the customer and they are overwhelmed. It was also in a kind of industry where, people are super passionate about this. People will kind of, as Cassie walked like 20 minutes just to get her groceries, people feel very emotionally connected to the product. And we would get back notes in the post when they're sending their bags back, like letters almost, where they're saying how great this is, how much this means to them, how much this has changed their lives. Those types of like, you're taking, as I said, you're creating something, you're figuring it all out. No one's like, there's no playbook for this. You like finding little ingenious solutions to like super silly things, and you take like such joy out of like just solving like a tiny little problem. And then the big overwhelming joy is like you reach a customer that like seriously appreciates what you've done, and it's like quite a good feeling to be, feeling of like acknowledgement for us, like thanks for doing this, which was great. And then also, like, as I said, like in the team, when we're talking about the team, it's, you're sharing those joys with like these people that you've been in the trenches with. That it wasn't easy kind of, finishing work at like 7:30, getting on the bike and then like riding in the rain and dropping these like parcels off. And like you get to the next stage of the business where you're like outsourcing delivery, and like you go out for a beer with the other two founders, and you like feel this massive sense of accomplishment, even though it's like these micro accomplishments. And that was like, it was a good feeling.
That's amazing. So you touched on this a bit, but setting up systems to ensure like the smooth running of all the processes must have been quite a task. I can imagine it being a bit harder with your refill service compared to a different company that's just selling once-off products, over and over again to return customers. So was Airtable the main software that you used to make everything run smoothly?
I mean, Airtable was just, it revolutionized like what we were able to do in the business. And I mean, I started working on Airtable initially, and then Will just kind of took the reins and designed. I mean, I helped him a little bit, but like full credit to Will for this, because he took the reins on Airtable and created this back end system that was just incredibly flexible, incredibly accurate, incredibly fast. And the reasons why we had these complications was because, how do I put this? If you're selling t-shirts on Shopify, and which was our front end, and you have large, medium, and small t-shirts in white, let's say. If you sell out of your small t-shirts, you can't give a customer a large t-shirt because that doesn't make sense. Whereas with us, we've got a 25 kg bag of oats in the warehouse. So if we run out of small oats, we can just decant from our 25 kg bag into the small one, right? But if people are buying 5 larges and like 2 smalls, different customers, the system needs to work out constantly and live how much we have left in each of the sizes and constantly update Shopify with that information. So that's on the front end inventory management side. But the real genius, in my opinion, was the back end packaging side. So we had to know why each of our products have a specific size bag that's going out to each customer. So we have to know how many bags each customer has and how long they've had it for. That Airtable then plugs into our automated email kind of software that then reminds them to send back the bags. We then get the bags back and count how many bags they've returned and cross-reference that in the system to how many bags they've got out. So at any stage, we can see how many bags are out, how many bags are in stock, and like where these bags are. And we knew this was going to be like a ridiculously important metric if we were to go down the fundraising route of like how many people are actually returning bags. And then also from that, we were able to calculate all of our footprint kind of measures, your like CO2, your waste, all of those types of things are all based on the return basis. And Airtable is able to track this, manage this, really give us a picture of what's going on in the business. So it's like I can't stress enough how much of a game changer it was and kind of how much Will contributed to that and built that side of things. It was quite extraordinary.
That's crazy. So for people listening who've never heard of Airtable before, what you've just explained can still seem quite daunting or scary, like setting this all up. And like there is a learning curve to it, but can you explain sort of the basics of what Airtable is and the possibilities?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, Airtable is a database. So it's not a replacement for Excel or Google Sheets. It's not like a spreadsheet. And what Airtable is essentially doing is it's very good at linking different records together. And what I mean by that is you'll have like an entry. So let me just like, maybe it's easy if I walk through an example. So for instance, we'll get 25 kgs of oats, to go back to that example. We'll put that in our Airtable system. It will remember from the last time how much oats we put in, because we update the what we call the parent record. When someone buys oats on Shopify, it's doing that whole calculation that I explained, but also importantly, it's subtracting how many oats we have on hand in the warehouse. So then it's linking the order that's come through on Shopify with what's already in our database and subtracting it off automatically. So you're able to link those two records basically to do that. And you can do that throughout the whole process. So for instance, we link the number of what size bags are with that order to the customer. So then you know how many bags that the customer has. So it's all of these different levels of linking that you're able to do that is very, very flexible, that is no code. So it's very closely related to I won't get into that. It's a no code software that you're able to do very easily. There is a learning curve to it, but it's a database management system. So anything that you kind of having multiple records on or multiple entries in, it's very good at. And then on top of that, it's incredible at linking different services. So for one thing, because we had all the addresses of the customers that came in, it can very easily through an app that's like linked to Airtable, plot all of those people on a map, and then like the biggest orders relate to the biggest dot. So you can see on your concentration very easily and know like very cheaply, see where's everyone making the orders from, where these people actually are, then you can like plot their age because they put their age in, where are, like, you get an immense amount of data very quickly and in such a digestible form. Yeah. And then just one more thing, you can see I'm passionate about Airtable, but you can link all of your different like softwares with it. So for instance, we linked the Shopify and we linked the email, like the reminder emails, the welcome emails, all our different like email chains is all based on the data it's getting into Airtable. So it's like one system that's like your kind of hub that aggregates everything together.
Awesome. Thanks for that explanation. I think it's so important for people to understand that you are capable of like building a functioning company with the tools available to you. A lot of people use excuses about, not knowing how to code or not being able to do X, Y, and Z, but there are really valuable resources out there that like enable you to do really cool things. So once you set this all up and had the systems in place, Airtable was set up, were you seeing growth? What challenges were you facing?
Yeah. So, I mean, as I kind of alluded to earlier, like we were seeing growth. I mean, it's very easy to grow from zero. So we were seeing growth, and kind of month on month, we were doing like quite well. We were like really excited about, how we were doing. We did hit some plateaus just because our delivery area was super small. And that's when we kind of were talking about, how do we expand this, but get delivery companies on board. So we went through that whole process, and that's almost when we took out the loan, which like allowed us to kind of grow the footprint significantly and also grow our kind of, warehouse and infrastructure and all the rest. I suppose, yeah, it would have been an area I would have focused on a lot more. I struggled a little bit with the B2C element of it, where I think kind of it's hard to be speaking to all of these customers in like an intimate, genuine way, which I think kind of this industry requires. I think any form of insincerity will be highly disfavored. Like people wouldn't receive that well. So we are very cautious of that. But at the same time, as I said, we tried a number of different sales channels, and we didn't find like a huge amount of traction in the different areas. And this is where we should have broadened our scope to, look at acquiring different businesses that were, not doing so well, or partnering with other people. And this is actually when we did partner with a firm, I won't mention their name, but they were probably one of the biggest eco marketplaces based in London, but kind of delivering across the UK. Kind of, they were an aggregator of eco products. They didn't kind of make anything themselves. And essentially we were going to form a brand called The Pantry together and be their own food supplier on their website. And they had kind of hundreds of thousands of followers. They sold us this real big dream of, how many sales they're going to bring in. The expectations were ridiculously high. And this is when I alluded to it earlier, where, we tried to like like increase our operational size immensely to get up to the scale that they said, you're going to like 4x your number of orders in the first week and then 4x every week after that, and we were like, flip, well, this is an amazing opportunity. Let's go down this road. But, we didn't and we had very little data. So I'm not going to be too hard on myself for this, but it was very hard to assess like if that was actually true, because we saw their gross sales on their website. They showed us their number of followers. They showed us their traction, and it was all super positive. And then, long story short, we scaled up our operations. We did everything we need to. I shifted my focus completely away from like organic sales and growth onto like operationalizing this business for this partnership. And the partnership didn't go the way we wanted to. The sales were just so much lower. They didn't market it as much as they said they were going to. It was a bit of a, it just kind of didn't work out. I don't think it worked out the way they wanted it to either, but I don't think there was really any finger pointing, but there was just, it just didn't, we were both disappointed with the result, and, we were in a place we were expecting way more orders, and we didn't get that. So it was quite a turning point in the business that we were going, well, what do we think can we do this? And like, how do we do this? It changed our thinking a little bit. I don't know if that answered the question. I think I went a bit off piece there, but
no, that made sense. Yeah. And so as you touched on this partnership and you're about a year and a half into the business, I'm not really sure how to put it, but you decided to move on from in. How did you come to that decision? Was it a difficult one?
So, I mean, it was at that point that kind of, that partnership wasn't working as we wanted to. And we were thinking, well, let's rebuild this business model and, or just alter it for what we've actually seen, because we've been so involved in this business that we've been touching, but like, let's get the data from the last year and actually see how this is like. We were watching it quite closely, but you need to really go through it with fine tooth comb, probably more often than we did. And it was at that point that we kind of said, well, this is a very high touch business model in terms of picking and packing, washing the bags on return, hygiene ratings, labeling, food ratings. And on top of that, they are very low margin products. So you're having to ship a lot of volume to make this a success. And to ship that much volume, you need a huge amount of working capital. So we're going to have to raise quite a lot of money to do that. You need significant amount of automation to get that going. And that's when we started looking, and like, as this was happening kind of from a macro environment, the gorillas and the 15-minute delivery startups were all coming into fruition. And, that was quite scary from our perspective. Even though we are going after a very different market, we really didn't want to have to compete with these VC-backed unlimited cash companies. And that's when I started looking at kind of the results of businesses that were similar to us, like just in the delivery space of food, not even like the zero waste space or the secondary packaging. And I mentioned Ocado earlier, those are regarded as the most highly technical, best operations. They've got these beehive packing facilities, etc. And they're really struggling to do it at scale profitably. And we then decided, okay, well, we sat down as a team. It was tough discussions, because this is a kind of your baby that you've created, that you've nurtured to this point, and you kind of going, well, what do we do? Do we push on? And we decided, well, let's keep this going, but we need to kind of potentially pivot a little bit into higher margin spaces, or do we pivot into packaging? Because that's actually what we were thinking we were. We are a packaging company. We weren't a food company. Or, do we go into more homeware stuff? That's, sustainable homeware and that sort of thing, a lot higher margin. So there were a lot of different kind of thought processes that we were going down. But if essentially we were thinking, is this the right way for us to go? And is this, if we do want to go down this route, we're going to have to raise a lot of money, and that's potentially going to come from friends and family, and kind of potentially go into Cedars or something like that, where I had a bit of an experience. And, that's you're going to commit to this for the next 5 years. And as I said, we tried to go down the pivoting route, but it wasn't, nothing presented itself as a really good opportunity that we had better expertise in than anyone else. And essentially at that point, we had to kind of make a really tough decision that we didn't want to do this for the next 5 years. We didn't want to raise capital. And essentially what that meant was that we needed to look for either someone to buy the business, which I thought was incredibly low probability because I hadn't seen any businesses of this size kind of be sold, or we need to kind of take a little bit of a hit and shut it down. To my great relief and real excitement, I reached out to like a number of different people. We knew quite a lot of people in the ecosystem. We were on a lot of groups, and essentially we found a guy called Mitch Platt, who's actually become, I've done quite a bit of work with him subsequently, and just, a really, really, really great dude. He kind of came out and he was looking to get into the space, and he had just acquired a physical zero waste store with an upcoming website. But the store had a huge amount of sales, but no back end, no kind of planning, no processing power. It was, he said, it was dire straits in the like back end of the department, but they had a lot of sales. And essentially I told him about we really got along well. I walked him through our Airtable and how everything works and how everything fits together, and kind of, he was blown away. And I think he was blown away. But Mitch wasn't the only guy we were speaking to. We were speaking to a lot of different people that were looking and that were interested. But essentially what happened is that Mitch decided, let's go forward with this. And it was on a 2 basis points. He said he would acquire the business for X, and he would pay an additional X for the integration of the software. So essentially he paid us off, which was really great, which means we made kind of, we're not on yachts or anything like that, but we didn't lose any money, which was fantastic. And then we did the integration for him. And essentially after that, he offered us, he said, instead of paying you for the integration, I've actually worked so well with you and Will, because Nick kind of wasn't involved in the integration element of things. And he said, would you guys be interested in taking an advisory role? And instead of the payment that I owe you, I'm going to give you equity in the business. So Will and I accepted that kind of with open arms. And we've had like just a really fantastic working relationship kind of going forward. A lot of trust, a lot of open-endedness, but kind of all of us, it was actually one of those lovely moments where, you don't get it often don't get it often in the world today, where you kind of trust someone with quite an unknown person with quite a big decision. And I just felt Mitch and I and Will had a really good understanding of each other, and kind of we all went out on limbs at different stages in the process, and it kind of worked out really, really well. And like now, I speak to Mitch every other week, kind of helping him with different things in his business where we can add value. we do kind of quarterly meetings, to kind of see how the strategy is going, how things are working out. And it's so good to see he's really growing that business. And it's exciting to watch. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Such a happy ending.
Yeah, it was a very happy ending, I must say, to something that we were quite nervous about where it was going.
Yeah. So you've learned such valuable lessons from starting in zero waste. What advice would you give to someone who wanted to start their own business?
I would say, like, do a little bit of research initially, speak to a lot of people that are like smaller fish. People are actually so willing to help, just like reach out and ask. And it's like, people don't like doing it these days, but just pick up the phone, like just call someone, because it's so valuable to just get like 10 minutes of conversation with someone that like can actually knows what they're talking about and can help you. As I said, like, don't do over amount of research, but do a little bit. Just jump into the proof of concept stage of the business, like, and do that super scrappily. Like, don't care about like making this perfect or making sure the logo or the font is absolutely like right. People aren't actually buying that. They're buying, like, they're seeing value in your product, and like, make it nice, but like, don't spend all your time doing it. And then like, as the business grows, like, take steps out, disciplined, to actually go, okay, is this the best route for me? Like, what are the other options on the table? And like, don't stop asking people for advice. I think that's also what I did. Like, you're so focused on being in the business and like getting things up and running in your like tick list that you need to get through. It's like, I didn't speak to enough people or like go to enough events to do that. And then like, as the business is growing and coming alive, either take a little bit of debt, take a little bit of equity, and like actively employ people that can help you get more time back. And that's a real hard balance to do. I would say that's like super tricky, but if you can strike that balance of like getting your time back and actually growing the business properly, that's fundamental, I'd say.
Great advice. So what are the next steps for Luke Bolton? What are you working on? What are you on to next? What's happening?
So more recently, I've been inspired by a concept called entrepreneurship through acquisition. And essentially that is taking a more traditional, boring business and acquiring that and growing that kind of from, or kind of, yeah, just growing that business. These are simple businesses. These are profit generating businesses. And for me, it's like the perfect balance between having an environment where it's a small business, you can still have a massive impact on the outcomes of kind of the operations and where you take this business, but you've dramatically lowered the risk of a startup. You've dramatically lowered the administrative burden of, getting, or like starting up the company, doing the trademarks, doing like the accounting softwares. There are obviously other problems with it, but like, for me, that risk reward balance is far, far better. But more in the short term, excitingly, I'm going to be doing a MBA starting in August. So very excited about that, and hopefully we'll learn quite a lot, and potentially, get more into the entrepreneurship through acquisition field afterwards.
Awesome. Congratulations. I feel like with your experience, you may have a slightly different approach to an MBA than most people, because you've already been there and done that in zero waste. So what do you hope to gain from your MBA experience?
Sure. I feel like I've done my interviews. No, so I do think like I'm a little bit of a different candidate to some of the people that will be there, but not definitely not on my own. I think that the MBA has shifted quite a bit to have an entrepreneurial focus, which is really great. But I mean, for me, with the MBA, it's like part hard skills. So there are a lot of hard skills that I would hope to learn, like even kind of the more, financial modeling skills or the, organizational structure skills that, I've never been in a bigger organization and like created a culture and, never been in that type of environment. And I think that those harder skills will be super interesting for me. And then, I think one of the biggest parts is, speaking to other people who've had very different backgrounds, very different careers, and how they think about things and how they go about things, and kind of the skills that they've learned along their way, and just kind of getting their opinion on, the different ideas I have, because I have far more bad ones than good ones, and having them as sounding boards. But I mean, overall, I just think it's going to be a really exciting period where it'll be a big adventure, like just a lot of fun and a lot of like exploring some of, the questions I want to know about my career and where I want to go, and kind of formulating that in my own head.
Awesome. I'm sure it will be an amazing experience. So I left this question out for the last 2 episodes, but a friend suggested I bring it back. So officially now, this is my last question of every show. It is a bit of a selfish one, but the purpose of the show is quite selfish anyway. I just want to learn from those who have gone out and actually taken action. So that being said, what advice would you give me on how I can improve hosting the show?
Good question. I would say first, before I go into all the Airtable skills of running a business, I should probably tell you a bit more about the business
Yeah.
and kind of a background. But overall, it's been just, yeah, super enjoyable. And I mean, selfishly for me, a really good experience to have to reflect on what I've done and where I've gone. I think one element that you could ask, and I find really interesting to go into it, is kind of more the emotional side, more kind of the psychological side of, how you feel throughout the process. Because I think, well, at least in my opinion, like the startup world is like severely over glamorized. And there were times where it's like incredibly hard, where it's like not fun. It's like you actually, there's this like whole mental side of things where, because this is your business, because there's no one else there, it's not like you're working at a big four accounting firm, and when you go and leave, employee 1445 is not there and 1446 picks up the reins. It's like you go on holiday and all you think about are the problems that are gonna, you never off. And I think kind of delving into more of the emotional, psychological side of things, and like what you can do to safeguard that, or like help that, I think is a really nice thing to kind of get stuck in. And know, well, few people kind of go that layer deeper, and I think that's super. I wish I'd known a lot of that before.
Awesome. Thank you for the feedback. Appreciate it. So thanks for chatting with me today. It was great learning about your experiences starting in and the ins and outs of bootstrapping a business. You've learned a lot from the experience, and I'm sure you'll go on to build some amazing companies after your MBA. If people want to learn more about you and your story, or simply just get in touch, how would they do so?
Probably best on LinkedIn, I would say.
Awesome.
Luke Bolton.
Luke Bolton on LinkedIn. Well, thanks again, Luke, and chat soon.
Thanks so much, Byron. Really, really good to be here. It was just a great experience.
Thanks for listening. I hope you learned something today. Everything we discussed will be in the show notes. And remember to take time to take a step back and evaluate where you're going and how far you've come. See you next week.